Hello everyone, I am Vibha Chauhan and welcome to NCERT Classes Funda Clear. So today I will explain Class 8 History Chapter 6. Chapter is Weavers, Iron Smelters and Factory Owners. So in this chapter we will study about cotton textiles in India and what was in Britain, how was the factories in Britain, industries in Britain, and iron and steel factories, how did they came to India, what was effects of British rules of British industrialization. So Britishers in Britain, there was industrialization growing, and in industries they were using mechanized production, mechanized technology, they were using modern technology, they were using machines for their work, and that affected the people of India, the weavers, the factory owners of India. So what were those effects? We will study in this chapter about national movement, about Tata Steel Company and about weavers of India. So by the 1850s, Britain has gained its iron and steel company in Britain, and thus it was called as workshop of the world because they were the whole and sole people of selling them into the world. They were exporter of iron and steel. So what are the topics of this chapter? The topics of this chapter are Indian textiles and the world market, and in this we will study words tell us history, Indian textiles in European markets, who were the weavers, the decline of Indian textile, cotton mills come up, the sword of Tipu Sultan and wood steel, abandoned furnaces in village, iron and steel factories come up in India. So our first topic is Indian textiles and the world market. So in 1750, during the period of 1750, before Britishers conquered the area of Bengal, the region of Bengal, you know that they conquered Bengal in 1757 after the Battle of Plassey. So before they conquered the region of Bengal, there was flourishing trade of cotton textiles. They were doing trade, and in whole the world they were known for their fine quality and exquisite craftsmanship. It was not that only the quality of cotton was fine, but their craftsmanship, their working was also fine, and they were trading with Southeast Asia, West Asia and in Central Asia. So during that time they were trading so much, and memories of this flourishing trade had been preserved in English museums by Englishmen. So our first subtopic is words tell us history. So as I have said that memories of that flourishing trade were preserved, so with those words which were written in those documents, we can understand history, we can understand what happened in the past. Like Britishers first encountered in the area of Mosul, which is in present day Iraq, and they found Arab merchants carrying the Bengal cotton textile which was from India, and thus they called those textiles as muslin. It was derived from the word Mosul because they found it in Mosul, so they called it as muslin. And the Portuguese landed on the coast of Kerala for spices, to trade for spices, to buy spices, and they found cotton textiles there, and thus they called those clothes as calico, and thus subsequently the calico word was used for all clothes, all cotton textiles which was from India. So they called calico because it was from Calicut. In Kerala it was a place Calicut, and there they landed first, and thus they called as calico. And there are many words such as those, such as chins, such as bandhana, and they have their own history. Chins clothes was a flowery design, a florin design, and those clothes were worn by rich and high people of Britain, which was imported from India, and even the Queen of Britain wore those clothes. So the value of chintz clothes in Britain was high, and what about the history of chintz? Chintz is derived from the Hindi word chint, which means a florid spotted design on clothes. So thus it is called as chintz cloth. And bandhana. Bandhana is derived from Hindi word bandhana, which means tying, because bandhana cloth was used for it was a scarf which was used for tying neck. You know that how we use scarf. So these all words have their own history, we can understand by this. So our next subtopic is Indian textiles in European markets. So as I've discussed that there was a popularity of Indian cotton textile in Europe, in Britain in mainly you can say. So by the popularity of Indian cotton textiles, the wool and silk makers of Britain started protesting against the import of those textiles from India, because they were worried about them. If India was importing something, India was importing textiles to Britain, so their business was decreasing, they had no profit with that. And in 1720, the Britain government introduced a new act which came to be known as Calico Act. And in this act, it was that the chintz cloth, which was flowery design cloth, will not be imported from India, would not be imported from India to Britain, and the business of wool and silk makers of Britain would be flourished, because there would be no cotton textile from India. So people would buy the wool and silk makers cloth which was manufactured by them. So because of that they wanted to make profit, but it was hard for them to compete against Indian textiles because it was of very high quality. So what they do, they started to build factories, build cotton mills for their industries, for their textiles. They started to do industrialization in Britain. And so for this, the weavers of Britain started to build cotton mills in Britain, and this led to an technology innovation in Britain. For example, spinning jenny was invented in 1764, and with that they were helped a lot, because it required one people and there were many spindles, so they could do work by one person, and there were many spindles, so they at one time they could make many threads at one time. So this was a big innovation which revolutionized their textiles. And second was the invention of steam engine in 1786, which also led to the textiles of Britain, which also helped the textiles of Britain. So these were the technology innovation in Britain. But still, by the end of 18th century, the Indian cotton textiles were highly valued in different parts of the world. The Dutch, the French were buying those clothes from India by the imported gold and silver from the European countries, from their countries. But as you have seen in chapter 2, that after Britishers gained the political power, there was no gold and silver imported from European countries. So this was the Indian textile in European markets. So our next subtopic is, who were the weavers? So you might have been thinking that I am using so much weavers. So question is this, who were weavers? Weavers were the people or were communities which were specialized in weaving. They do weaving of clothes, and they pass their specialized method of weaving to their generation, to their next generation. That means if a person is weaving, then he would pass to his generation, and then he would pass to his generation. So a cycle would become of weaving. And some of the communities of weavers were Tanti weavers of Bengal, Zulhas or Momin weavers of North India, Saleh and Kaikolar and Devangs of South India. Saleh is also known as Salyar. There are many 3-4 words for those. So these were some communities of weavers, and there was the process of weaving which was in 3 stages. First one was spinning, which was mostly done by women, and in this process charkha and takli was used for making thread. So this was the process of spinning, and then came the process of weaving. In the most communities of weavers, it was highly done by men, but in some it was done by women. So in weaving, the clothes were woven by weavers, and third stage was dyeing and printing. In this, the cloth was dyed, because before it was white as it was cotton. So for dyeing it, to coloring it, it was dyed, and the person who dyed it was called as rangreez. Rang means color, so they were called as rangreez. And after this, there were block printers who printed some kind of pattern, some kind of design on that clothes, and they were called as chippigars. So this was weaver. They were weavers who done their process of weaving in India. So our next subtopic is the decline of Indian textile. So the industrialization of Britain, the growing textile industries of Britain affected the cotton textile, the weavers of Britain. How it affected? First one was that it was very hard for us, for Indians, for Indian weavers to compete with the British textiles in American and European markets. And second one was, it was very hard to export their textiles to England because there were high duties on them. So these were two ways, two parts in which it affected the people of India, it affected the weavers of India, the textile of India. And worse was that thousands of weavers lost their employment. Women who used to do spinning had lost their business. So these affected the weavers, and they were selling their finished work to India, to Indian people, by forcing them, and in return they were asking for money. So they were giving their finished work to India, and by the 1880s, the 2/3 population of India were wearing the Britain cloth, which was imported from Britain. However, in one way, the Indian textile flourished, which was handloom weaving, because there were some designs, there were some methods which could not be done only with machines. Like, how could a machine could make the pattern of sari, make the border of sari? So it was very hard. And second one was, the Britishers were selling clothes which was only for middle person or highly person, but the lower people of India who was below poverty line, who was very poor, used to wear very coarse clothes, and it was not manufactured by Britishers. So in this way, the weavers gradually and slowly flourished, their business flourished. And you might have been thinking, what happened to those weavers who had lost their business? So some went to cities in search of work, and some went to another continents, Africa, America, to plantation work. We have discussed that planters came to India for plantation, so they went through with them. And some went in cities in cotton mills. They were working in cotton mills. And you might have heard the name of cities, Madura in South India and Sholapur in West East India. So these cities, these towns emerged as the center of new weaving tradition. There was done weaving. And during the national movement, Mahatma Gandhi also boycotted the imported cloth which was from Britain, and urged power to stop those, and asked people to wear hand spun, hand woven clothes, and gradually and slowly khadi became a symbol of nationalism, and the charkha, which was used to spun thread, which was used to spun clothes, subsequently became the symbol of India. And in 1931 the Indian National Congress also adopted it as in the middle of their tricolor flag. So this was all about the decline of Indian textiles. Our next subtopic is cotton mills come up. Cotton mills. What are cotton mills? Cotton mills, you can say that we have discussed. The process of weaving had many phases, had many stages, and which was done in different places. But in cotton mills, it was below one roof, the whole process was done, spinning, weaving, all process. So cotton mills. In 1854, the first cotton mill came in Bombay. Bombay nowadays it is called as Mumbai. And why did it come to Bombay? Because from Mumbai or Bombay, you can say, the black soil was very high, and you have studied that black soil was rich in cotton. So from there they got a high amount of cotton, and there was also a port because it was an ocean area. So from those ports they could do their trade with other countries also. They could export it to other countries. So first cotton mill established in India was in Bombay in 1854, and over 1900, by the 1900, or you can say during 1900, 84 cotton mills operated in Bombay. And it was not that all cotton mills were operating in Bombay. There were other cities too, like Kanpur, Ahmedabad, United Provinces nowadays is Uttar Pradesh. So these were other cities where cotton mills came up. First, there were many competitions for them. There were many problems for them because India was under British government, and British government was not supporting them. How could they support? Because they had to their own trade from Britain. They had to import their own clothes from Britain. So they were not supporting Indian cotton mills. They refused to give them facilities. But situation changed during the First World War in 1914, because in First World War in 1914, Britishers used their cotton mills, used their factories to their war needs, because they didn't need cotton clothes. They wanted war needs like arms, like weapons. So they used those factories for their own needs in World War First in 1914, and due to this, cotton mills of India grown up, they are valued high. So this was all about cotton mills come up. So our next topic is the sword of Tipu Sultan and Wood's steel. So as I have discussed all about cotton textile, which was in chapter, our first part weavers is completed. Now is iron smelters. So Tipu Sultan, we have discussed that he had fought 4 battles with Britishers, and in 4th he died in 1799. So his legendary swords were very important for Britishers, and still now they are preserved in museums of England. So why this was very important, why this was highly valued? It was said that it could easily rip the opponent's armor with no problem. So his sword was very important because it was made by a special type steel, which was woods, which was a high carbon steel, which was only made in South India during that time, which was flourishing in South India. And Francis Buchan, who toured the area of South India in 1800, a year after Tipu Sultan's death, found how it was made, how the woods steel was made, because it was very important. It gave different kind of design on that sword. There was a water pattern on that, and small crystals were embedded from iron. So this was very important, very high valued. So Francis Buchan toured the region of South India and found how it was made. It was made in furnaces, and in those furnaces small clay pots were kept, and in those clay pots the iron ore was kept. So this was the process of making wood steel, and thus the wood steel was made, and it was very hard. And woods is an anglicized version of word ukku in Kannada and hukku in Tamil and Telugu, and in Malayalam urukku, which meant steel. So you know how it is called as woods because it was an anglicized version. And there are some interesting facts about wood steel, which was that great scientist and discoverer of electricity and electromagnetism Michael Faraday studied about wood steel by touring the south region of India in 4 years from 1818 to 1822. So he studied about those furnaces, about those methods of making wood steel for 4 years, and this is an interesting fact. However, the making of wood steel, the business of wood steel gradually and slowly declined. How it declined? What was? Because of Britishers it declined. Britishers had affected the growing steel and iron factories of Britain affected. So our subtopic is abandoned furnaces in village. So the iron smelting, the process of wood steel required a specialized technique of refining iron, and in central Bihar, there were many smelters, iron smelters, who used to do smelting of steel. They were called as smelters because they used to do smelting process. So thus they were called as iron smelters. So in region of Bihar, in every village there were many smelters, and they used to do iron smelting. And the furnaces which were used for making wood steel for the process of smelting was made from sun-dried bricks and clay. So these were furnaces which was made from sun-dried bricks and clay. And the process of smelting was done by men, and women used to do bellows. That means they used to do pump air, because in furnaces the iron and charcoal was mixed to blow fire, and air was also required. So bellows were used to pump air into the fire, and women used to do these works. And however, by the late 19th century, the process, the craft of smelting, iron smelting, declined in South region. There were many reasons for this. There were many problems with this. What were those? Why was it done? Because the first problem was the forest laws. As you have seen in chapter 4, in forest laws there were reserved forests, and due to this, the smelters who used to do iron smelting could not go into forests, where they went to occupy to get charcoal, to get iron ore, which was very important for their process of smelting. So this was first problem, and if they disobeyed the rule and went into the forest, there were many punishments by Britishers. So this was first problem. And second one was that if they got the right to go into forest, into the reserved forest by Britishers, but there were many high revenues. They had to pay high revenues, high taxes, and due to this their income was reduced. There were no profits. They were in loss. They were in poverty, and because of this they left their business. And there was another problem, which was the steel and iron which was imported from Britain was used by blacksmiths. the blacksmiths, they were not using the iron steel of smelters, iron smelters. So because of this, they left their business and went to do something else. So this was all about abandoned furnaces in village. So the next and last subtopic of this chapter is iron and steel factories come up in India. So in 1904, Charles Well, who was a geologist, and Dorabji Tata, who was the eldest son of Jamshedji Tata, were visiting the forest of Chhattisgarh in search of fine quality iron ore in large amount of iron ore. Because Jamshedji Tata wanted to spend his large part of fortune in building a large steel and iron factory. He wanted to make a steel and iron factory in India. So Dorabji Tata and Charles Well were visiting the forest of Chhattisgarh, and they were visiting in the month of April in hot summer day, but they could not find anything, and after a few hours, they found some people carrying the basket loads of iron ore, and they were agarias. And after asking them, they found that those iron ores were occupied from the Rajhara Hills, which was in nearby. So they went to the Rajhara Hills in search of iron ore, and there they found a good amount of good quality of iron ore, and they were very happy with this because they had to build their factory. But there was a problem, which was that region was very dry. There was no water, there were less water, and because of that the factory could not be run without water. So this was problem, and in search of iron ore they went to another regions, and finally they found good iron ore in good amount in the bank of river Subarnarekha, and there in 1912 Jamshedji Tata built his factory, which was called as the Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, and because he had made that factory TISCO, thus the area around that factory was called as Jamshedpur, and during that time it was in Bihar, but present day it is in Jharkhand. So in 1912 TISCO was built finally, but there were problems because British government were not protecting them. They were doing their own, they were importing their own steel from Britain, because they had thought that in India there could not be produced any good quality of steel, any good quality of iron, and for expansion of railways, for any work, they were importing iron and steel from Britain. But the situation changed after the First World War, which broke out in 1914 after the 2 years of TISCO establishment. In First World War, Britishers were busy on their own needs. They required military equipments for their soldiers to fight First World War, and because of that they bought iron and steel from TISCO Company of India. They bought iron and steel, which before they were not doing, but after the First World War the situation was completely changed. The total importation of iron and steel to Britain, to Britishers, to English East India Company was 90% of India's. India had 90% in whole importation of Britain. So situation changed after the First World War. We have seen in this chapter that there were struggles of cotton, textiles, of iron and steel factory, and we have seen the factories could only flourish after the decline, less import of Britain textiles and iron and steel. So this was all about the subtopic. Our chapter is completed. I have discussed all topics and subtopics, and in next video I will discuss next chapter. So thank you very much.